Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Home Video Library. I'm your host Nathan P. Butler, and this time we continue our look at some of those VHS cassettes that I received years ago from Matt Fry when he donated a big chunk of his collection into mine that got tucked away, and I never had a chance to watch them or feature them until now. We've looked at a few. We have a few back there. There's one in that stack still to go to record, but this time we look at two items that are effectively the same thing, though that is a little bit weird. We've seen a lot of these sort of unofficial biographies, unofficial behind the scenes of Star Wars type things, and sure enough, this is another of those coming from MVP. That is MVP Home Entertainment, as we will see here. Now, looking at these, my thought was, oh, it's going to be like Passport Video. Kind of meh quality and mostly just stock interview stuff that anyone can get their hands on. Not entirely, but it's still kind of, I'd say it's kind of one step above Passport Video, but not by a whole lot if you're familiar with some of those that we have looked at. There's two versions of this we're going to see. First, we have this. This is the Unauthorized Star Wars Story. The lightsaber's behind it, unauthorized with a Z, American spelling. On the actual video itself, it's an S, the British spelling. Unauthorized. This video has not been prepared, approved, licensed, or endorsed by any entity that created or produced the Star Wars properties, or is otherwise associated with them in any way. Title on the top. Side here, horizontal side. So we have, that's just like some markings from the previous owner. The Unauthorized Star Wars Story, unauthorized, same thing again. MVP Home Entertainment, VHS, and a product number. This one is product number MVP-822. That will wind up mattering. And the other side is effectively the same thing. Then we got the back here. The Unauthorized Star Wars Story, pictures of various actors and actresses and George Lucas himself. Information about it, unauthorized, again, that same thing. Copyright 1999. We got the barcode, MVP, their address and everything, and a warning for private use, blah, blah, blah. You know, the standard stuff down there. Again, this is another one, like some of the ones we've seen recently, where if you want to look this up on YouTube, you can watch the entire thing if you like. As for the cassette, nothing on this side. This part says the Unauthorized Star Wars Story. We got MVP up here. You've got product number, VHS, runtime, FBI warning, copyright, and FBI warning stuff. Here it is, 62 minutes long. And then strangely, we also have this one that's a little more visually appealing here. The Unauthorized Star Wars Story. We have, of course, the pictures of everybody. I wonder if this is a screener. I have seen screeners of this floating around, but I think they usually had a sticker on them. But we have this version here, unauthorized, same stuff there. Similar side here in terms of the design. Now, laid out a little differently, but pretty much the same. Title on the top. There you go. On the back, title, pictures, a little bit of a different setup here. Same text, which we'll read, unauthorized, blah, 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 MVP, copyright, same, 1999, their information here, the warning underneath, and then a similar label here. So MVP, 822, VHS, runtime, blah, 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 all kind of the same stuff. Although I would note that the packaging here has a different number. So this kind of less fancy one is MVP 822. This is MVP 828 for this version of it. They are the exact same thing when you actually put them into your player to watch them. What does it say about itself? The Unauthorized Star Wars Story. Packed full of interviews with the stars, directors, and producers. The Unauthorized Star Wars Story is a fascinating look at one of the world's biggest ever film phenomena, right? From the original Star Wars film through to the 1999 new release, The Phantom Menace, we follow the key stars and the cult heroes. We learn what it was like to be involved in the making of these momentous films, sharing experiences and anecdotes of what went on in front of the cameras and away from them. Of course, no video about the Star Wars films would be complete without a study of George Lucas, the man behind the phenomenon. We reveal how his childhood interests and obsessions led to the vision that created arguably the biggest films of all time. Brimming with facts, gossip, and stories, the Unauthorized Star Wars Story is an enthralling behind-the-scenes study of a remarkable series of films. For any follower of the series, this is a video not to be missed. Bum, ba-dum, bum. When you actually put it in, the way that the documentary starts is with sort of a crappy opening crawl type thing. It says the Unauthorized Star Wars Story, basic font, S instead of a Z, and so on, and then it kind of fades in some text a couple of times, although, ironically, now if it had been blue, it might actually kind of match Solo. We have, in the dark days of the mid-70s, cinema audiences were reaching an all-time low. Young people were just not going to see what was on offer. The Hollywood studios were desperate for hit movies, yet couldn't come up with winning formulas. Following his boyhood interest in space and believing in the force of his vision, George Lucas was busy creating a film that would influence generations and, for the movie industry, bring a new hope. So what you got here, it's weird because it seems as though some of this is stock interview stuff, and some of it is actual new interviews, and every great once in a while, it's hard to tell which is which. I'll try to note that a bit as we go, but it's kind of weird. There's a fair amount of discussion with Charles Lippincott, former Lucasfilm VP. That appears to be new. There is some stuff with Anthony Daniels. I can't tell if that is stock or new. I think at least some of it may be new, at least stuff that's later in the documentary. Though I would note that in the little subtitles, they list his character as C-3PO with no dash, just C-3PO run together. Then there's some time spent with Garrick Hagon, who played, of course, Biggs Darklighter in A New Hope, who they credit here, both in terms of the little subtitle when it shows his name, and when the host says it out loud, as Biggs Star Glider, G-L-I-D-E-R. What? Whatever. We have a bit with Gary Jenkins, the author of Empire Building. I think those are all original. Harrison Ford shows up. I wonder if that is stock material or not. It's hard to say. They did spell Han Solo right, so that's a plus. They talk about the myth of his casting. Jenkins talks about that. How, oh, well, he was just a guy working on the set or whatever. He was just a carpenter and they brought him in. But no, he was already kind of in the industry. He'd been in American Graffiti and so on, and kind of the actual casting background. There's some interview material with Peter Mayhew. I don't think I've seen that before, so it makes me wonder if that is stock or original. Kenny Baker is interviewed. Again, R2-D2 is missing the dash. Some of these, like the Kenny Baker stuff, part of what makes me think this is stock stuff is, you see a lot of times they'll have those interviews when they're on like a press tour, and it'll be like, they're sitting there facing one direction and like there's a poster of the movie or something on either side. It really looks like sometimes we see a shot of the person and something near them, instead of meaning to be like color splotches in the background, must be something that's there that maybe they've kind of covered over, so that you can't actually see what's being advertised there, maybe? It's kind of weird to me. It's really pronounced with the Baker footage. You have Carrie Fisher talking about her costume and so forth. Mark Hamill is interviewed. I don't know if either of those are stock. They talk about why the Biggs scene at Tashi Station was cut. And apparently that was because Alan Ladd said something along the lines of how, oh, it's just American Graffiti in space. It's just the teenagers hanging out. Oh, crap, we don't want to do that, so whatever. Not sure how true it is that that had any role in the removal of that footage, but whatever. They interview Lauren Peterson. There's a bit with Rick McCallum that I'm pretty sure is stock stuff. And you have Scott Chernoff from Star Wars Insider, speaking quite a few times. We'll talk more about some of the stuff that he said in a little bit. Joanne Sabranti of the Modesto Bee. You have Martin J. Horst, a neighbor of the Lucas family in Modesto, and Marcia Horst Lemena, if I'm saying that correctly, a childhood friend. In those cases, it looks like Sabranti is actually taking them on like a walking tour of the old neighborhood, and then it's actually on the porch of the Horst family. Another childhood friend, Mel Cellini, shows up. Jeremy Bulloch, Boba Fett, is interviewed. Did you guys just see that? Some kind of like, I don't know, some kind of fuzz or something just flew through the air. Jeremy Bulloch is interviewed, and that seems to be in his home. One way you can tell sometimes that the footage must be stuff that they shot themselves, because the footage is kind of crappy in quality. Like in the case of Jeremy Bulloch, it's him in his home, but it's kind of like he's kind of like off to one corner almost. He's off to one side, but kind of in the bottom 2/3 of the shot, so that behind him on the desk, you can see like a bunch of Boba Fett stuff. Except the lighting is so bad, you can't really make out the Boba Fett stuff except by the shape. Michael Carter, who played Bib Fortuna, is extensively interviewed in the latter part. In his home, kind of a green-tinted thing. He's kind of like sitting there chilling. Bad camera angle, bad lighting for that as well. There's a bit with David Prowse. Sam Jackson, who may be in stock footage, is talking about how he doesn't really know a whole lot about his role because it was just a little bit of pages that he was given to record for Phantom Menace. They talk, though, interestingly about how, and talking about kind of the interesting stuff here, so away from who it was that was being interviewed. They talk about how Lucas, as a kid, had like this haunted house type thing that they made, and they were charging neighborhood kids to come over to do it. But then they'd get kind of bored with it, so he would always want to revamp it to draw them in again. And that is kind of analogized to the special editions as a way of sort of putting on a new fresh coat of paint, so to speak, to bring people in to see what they had already seen a million times before. There's an interesting part that I don't think I've really seen covered much anywhere else about the delayed release in Japan, and how the fact that they had staggered the release of A New Hope originally led to Japan getting it a lot later than the US, which caused people to come from Japan on vacation, on tours basically, where a big part of their vacation was to make sure that they could see Star Wars in theaters before it was released back home. There are various man-on-the-street reactions to different stuff relating to Star Wars, including an uncredited appearance by Christian Slater, of all people. So that question of whether Lucas, with the special editions and whatnot, is he a perfectionist or is he a control freak? Because those could be very similar but have different connotations. We have the issue of secrecy. Carter, again, who played Biff Fortuna, saying that he told his kids, and one of his kids freaked out coming home one day saying, "I'm sorry, Daddy, I told my best friend," or the George Lucas police, coming for us, that kind of thing. Talk about how he was actually hired for Blue Harvest and didn't realize what it was initially. Again, about Samuel L. Jackson only knowing his pages for The Phantom Menace, so a bit about the secrecy there. Jabba, the digital character in the special editions, as sort of a proof of concept and a test for Jar Jar for the prequels. There is stock footage of an old interview with Mark Hamill commenting about how he was talking to Lucas about coming back as an Obi-Wan type character in another trilogy around 2011. But I only ever meant for there to be 6. My ass. Proust notes that the only people that he knew were returning for Phantom Menace were Kenny Baker, Ian McDiarmid, and Mark Davis. So what about Anthony Daniels? But hey, maybe if Vader actually shows up in 2 or 3, maybe he could come back in the suit as Vader, because again, it hadn't happened yet. And then I found that probably the things that stood out to me the most were some comments by Chernoff from Star Wars Insider. Chernoff says, among other things, is kind of funny, and they both kind of relate to sort of the same type of thing, which is the current atmosphere of Star Wars, and how he could not have predicted this, but how, in essence, you have the way that the original trilogy was perceived, how the prequels would be perceived, and then how those would become kind of the whole that's perceived one way relative to when Disney buys Lucasfilm and starts producing Star Wars content. Because he says, in 2 different clips, first off, quote, "I don't think that Star Wars fans want a Star Wars movie that isn't controlled by George Lucas. What's the point?" That is very much the attitude that you see out there of a lot of people who said, I'm out once Disney bought Lucasfilm and started producing new Star Wars stuff. In both sort of a general, respectable, I just don't want to watch this new stuff, that's cool, I'm not going to crap in somebody else's Wheaties, but it's just not for me, and the hardcore anti-Disney and grievance grifters online. But then when it comes to the prequels, he also says that he believes that prequels will be accepted, which they weren't by many originally. There's a lot of complaining about it. Now they're more accepted. But they would be accepted as if it's like a new chapter being released of the Bible because it's coming from Lucas, which again kind of plays in that exact same thing. So even in this particular era, even in this era when the prequels are just coming out, you have this person who's very intricately connected to the fans through Star Wars Insider, basically expressing his understanding of how Star Wars fans perceive Star Wars in relation to Lucas as the creator versus anything that might be beyond Lucas himself. For better or worse, the way that it is played out in real life and the splintering of fandom, it's interesting and almost prophetic that Chernoff was referring to those types of things to some degree, even as early as this interview for something that was released in, again, 1999. So, again, not the best behind-the-scenes thing I've ever seen. It's really not produced super well, but it's interesting and does have certain twists on the story and elements that I don't think we've seen a whole lot. Watching this alongside watching that Star Wars biography that is far better produced, that George Lucas Creating an Empire from A&E, watching those kind of back-to-back here was an interesting thing because you could really tell when they were going into a place we really hadn't seen much about before. Not as much with this as biography, but still there were some elements of this, like the haunted house type thing and the interview with Chernoff, that I think makes this a worthwhile thing to check out. Don't expect high quality in terms of the video quality, the production value and stuff like that, their ability to frame a shot when interviewing someone. But if you're looking for it, the Unauthorized Star Wars Story is apparently out there in 2 different versions. Again, I don't know if this is perhaps a screener here, but you can find it out there from 1999 on VHS, or again, just look it up on YouTube, and the entire thing is viewable online. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the home video viewers.